Hi, and welcome to Middle East Macromedia. Today, our guest is Lynne O'Donnell, an Australian journalist, author, who used to be an Afghanistan bureau chief for the AFP, and she has been subsequently banned from covering Afghanistan. Hi, Lynne. How are you today?
Not so much banned from covering Afghanistan, but perhaps from going to
From
Afghanistan
going.
to cover it. Yes. Yeah.
Yes. So you covered Afghanistan from the inside for a better part of a decade, right? Or 2 decades. And you've been reporting even after the Taliban made clear that you are not welcome back. So before we get into the specifics of the Afghan Pakistani relations, would you maybe like to tell us what do you think where the country stands now? What is the most important thing to look at the moment?
About Afghanistan, do you mean?
Yes.
We're coming up to 5 years since the return of the Taliban for their second regime. In that time, they have managed to establish diplomatic relationships with quite a lot of countries and have managed also to get formal recognition from Russia. Russia is the only country that recognises the Taliban as the legitimate government of Afghanistan. Nobody else has gone quite that far. The Taliban have also been able to send their own personnel as diplomats to a few countries in Europe and to India, for instance. And they've also managed to convince a lot of countries around the world to close down embassies that were still flying the flag of the former republic, even if they haven't yet managed to convince countries, for instance, like Australia and the United Kingdom, to accept Taliban figures as occupiers of those embassies. A lot of the European countries are in discussions with the Taliban because of political pressure at home around immigration, and what they are wanting to do, like Germany has already done, is send illegal immigrants or people who have been found guilty of crimes who happen to be natives of Afghanistan, citizens of Afghanistan. They want to be able to send them back to Taliban-controlled Afghanistan. And so a lot of relationships are being formed around that imperative. What we see as a result of this is the Taliban claiming that they have a legitimacy that is not yet formalised but implied. And even though there are an awful lot of people, human rights advocates, women's rights advocates, anti-terrorism advocates, people who do point out the security situation in and around Afghanistan, who do not think that it is a good idea for any countries to have diplomatic relations with the Taliban or to have Taliban figures stationed in their countries. The Taliban take a lot of propagandizing value out of those relationships. The situation that Afghanistan has become since the fall of the Republic is basically a global hub for Islamist and terrorism. The United Nations Security Council reports at least once a year in great detail on the number of sanctioned organisations that are now based in Afghanistan and have the protection of the Taliban there. And we also know that Al-Qaeda is running training camps for terrorist organisations worldwide. So it's like a revolving door, whether you're Al-Shabaab, whether you're coming in from Mali or Mozambique or the Sahel or Somalia, Libya, any of these global transnational terrorist militant organisations are sending their people to Afghanistan, to Al-Qaeda training camps to get the right skills to be terrorists. So that's where Afghanistan is at the moment.
I wanted to also ask you about the relations between Pakistan and Afghanistan, because we know that also Pakistan has been attacked by the TTP, which is also based in Afghanistan. So what has changed in this regard ever since the Taliban came to power?
I think, I'm sorry, I look as if I'm laughing. I'm actually scoffing over the irony of it. as we know, although Pakistani officials still deny it, the Pakistani military and military intelligence agency harboured, protected, funded, armed the Taliban throughout most of the 20-year war that they were fighting against the NATO partners and the United States in Afghanistan. And really they thought, the Pakistani establishment thought, that what they were doing was ensuring that once the Taliban were in power, that they would be puppets and tools of the Pakistani establishment in order to create a buffer against the advance of India as the major South Asian power. India and Pakistan are arch enemies, and the Pakistanis really thought they were being very clever in doing that. We might remember too that the first person who made it to the Serena Hotel in Kabul within hours of the Taliban establishing their presence in Kabul in August 2021 was the head of the ISI standing there having an espresso, feeling so clever we did it. And the Taliban, I think, they really didn't spend a lot of time pretending otherwise, that they were their own people. Yep, thanks, we'll take it from here. And the Pakistani authorities have really taken quite a long time to come to terms with the fact that the Taliban are not their puppets as they had assumed, and that Afghanistan is now a hub for transnational terrorist organisations that threaten a large number of countries. The ETIM is there, they threaten China. The TTP, as you've mentioned, is threatening Pakistan and being given safe haven in Afghanistan and using Afghanistan territory to launch attacks over the border that are essentially an existential threat to the Pakistani state. And they keep denying it, and the evidence keeps piling up that that's what they're doing. The Pakistanis have tried an awful lot of different ways of bringing the Taliban to heel. There were border skirmishes. They've sent many, many thousands of Afghan people who were seeking refuge in Pakistan back over the border. They've had meetings after meetings. I was talking here in Melbourne to somebody, a senior Pakistani government official recently, and asked about it. And while he was still in denial officially about the protections that the Pakistan establishment provided for the Quetta Shura, the Peshawar Shura, but they're not called these things for nothing, throughout the war, he said, when we sit down and we talk face to face with the Taliban, they say one thing to our faces in the room, and once they're outside the room, they say something else altogether. They can't be trusted. You can't take them at their word. The TTP is using its bases inside Afghanistan from which to launch attacks on establishment, military and government bases and facilities in Pakistan, and are a very real threat to the Pakistani state.
So how do you think it can escalate? Because we've seen a lot of back and forth fire between Pakistan and Afghanistan, but what can happen? Do you think that it's a possibility that, that we will see boots on the ground, or it's not possible for now?
To be honest with you, I really don't know. I think that the Pakistanis are at this stage in a let's see if the bombing works mode. And as far as I know, they haven't yet crossed the border on foot. I don't think there are any Pakistani boots on the ground in Afghanistan as yet. That said, the border is also a fungible thing. The Durand Line is not recognised as the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan by the Afghans, although it is recognised by the Pakistanis. So if on the Afghan side they are crossing the Durand Line, or on the Pakistani side they're crossing the Durand Line, then what's the definition of boots on the ground? What we saw in recent days was the Taliban sending drones across the border, infiltrating Pakistani airspace. And now, where are they getting the drones? Who is arming them? And how much further are they going to go now that they have a defence arrangement signed with Moscow to arm them and provide armaments and ammunition. How far does that go? I mean, I've seen and posted articles on my Substack site that are essentially shopping lists of what the Taliban are expecting they will receive from Moscow in terms of boosting their own defences. Now, the Taliban are also very cleverly trying to frame the Pakistani attacks as attacks on Afghanistan, on Afghanistan's sovereignty. Well, that's clever. They claim to be the legitimate government of Afghanistan. But this is really Pakistan versus the Taliban. The Taliban, really, no matter what they say, I don't think people like you and I could stretch to them being representative of all Afghan people or territories or regions or ethnicities, or even half the population, those who are women. So it's a Pakistan versus a militant organisation that we call the Taliban. That's the situation. Where it goes from here, I think that we have to see how much the Taliban is willing and able to escalate the situation militarily. Karachi was a terrorist attack, a militant attack on the special forces base that we saw a little while ago. And Pakistan is very busy with a number of wars on its territory. You've got the Baloch rebellion, which is multi-hydra-headed, if you like. You've got also Baloch separatists in Iran have in recent years also fired over the border, and Pakistan has sent its air force against them on Iranian territory. And you've got the TTP and other, let's say, minor offshoots of Taliban, Al-Qaeda organisations in the mix there as well. So Pakistan's got a lot on its plate, all the while trying to make itself out to be the world's peacemaker by putting its foot in the water of the Iran-America-Israeli skirmishes over there. Peace washing, I think, is a good word for that. And also locking up human rights and Baloch rights advocates inside its own territory. So, you know, it's anybody's guess where this border war goes. Does that answer your question? That was quite convoluted.
Yes. No, absolutely it does. I mean,
Okay.
I think the best answers are the answers that don't really give you an answer. So, you know,
Thanks.
we're covering a number of
There's this and
different...
then this. Yeah. Oh, and this.
I wanted to ask you about ISKP, the Islamic State of the Khorasan province, because this was a major issue a couple of years ago when I was still covering Afghanistan. And we know that when the Taliban came to power, they basically opened up all the prisons, and people related to those groups all managed to escape and then continue their work. So what is happening with the ASKP right now? We know that the Taliban are trying to fight them, or this is at least what they you know, said.
Yes.
But what is the reality? How possible it is for the group to continue operating in Afghanistan?
What's the reality? Well, the reality is anybody's guess, and it's probably different no matter who you talk to. I remember the reality of ISKP changed on the 15th of August in 2021 when suddenly the Biden administration and the Taliban were on the same page, painting ISKP as their mutual enemy. And then we had that terrible attack at the airport that killed the 13 US service personnel and an untold number of Afghan civilians at that gate trying to get into the airport in an attack that bore all the hallmarks of the Haqqani group and yet was assigned to ISKP. And in the months that rolled out after the Taliban took over, ISKP suddenly took on this passional change that it was a huge threat. I've never really bought it, to be honest with you. I know I'm likely to be a bit of an outlier on that, but when you say it out loud, other people say, yeah, I've always thought that too. I've always thought that ISKP were closely aligned with the Haqqani, and that depending on who was to benefit, the Haqqani were able to say, attack over there, why don't you claim responsibility for it? The Haqqani have never claimed responsibility for anything, so farming out the ability to claim responsibility gave ISKP credit, maybe where it was due or not. And then I think that over time there was some disgust amongst people who had been Taliban loyalists that they were in discussions with on any level with the Americans. And so those people moved away from the Taliban towards ISKP, as it seemed to represent a more right wing, if you want to frame it like that, Taliban style entity. And I think that there is still, I suspect there is still a closeness and a utility between more radical groups like the Haqqani within the Taliban fold, and that they are useful at times and also a threat at other times because of the realm of radicalisation that exists within those parameters.
Yes.
I think that the ISKP is probably most useful to the Taliban as the mutual source of terrorist concern that justifies an ongoing relationship with the United States, that sees the United States funding the Taliban's so-called counter-terrorism efforts.
And what is happening within the Taliban right now? Because we know that there've always been like different factions and different opinions within the movement. What is happening there now from your perspective and as far as you can tell?
Are you talking about Kabul versus Kandahar, that sort of factionalisation that we have known about for the last few years?
Well, I'm talking about, in general, the Taliban government and, what is happening within their ranks. Like, what are the potential points of, division, or which faction is basically has taken over?
I think that the Kandahar faction around the Supreme Leader has worked very assiduously to consolidate its control. I think that that has been very successful. There are still pockets. Badakhshan seems to be fairly restless at the moment, and there have been recent efforts to change key personnel up there. I think that we're probably looking at gangland style divisions that are based around what money can be earned from the control of mining assets up there. Close to Haibatullah Akhundzada, the supreme leader, is a tribal leader called Bashir Noorzai, Haji Bashir Noorzai, who is an extremely powerful and wealthy man. He's a sponsor and has been for many decades of Haibatullah and previously of Mullah Omar as well. He returned to Afghanistan a couple of years ago after serving almost 20 years in US custody as a drug dealer, and immediately took his place at Haibatullah's right hand, and he very much controls access to mineral and mining resources and assets, first with the Chinese, now increasingly with the Iranians, but also previously with the Pakistanis and Turks and whoever else wants to come in and put the money down. And I think Haibatullah and Haibatullah Akhundzada and Haji Bashir Noorzai are working hand in hand to bring Badakhshan back under control. Haibatullah on the political side and Noorzai on the basically armed threat side. He has a lot of men under arms in his own right. So the short answer is I think Kandahar is ascendant at the moment. I think Kabul got a bit of a shock a little while ago when Sirajuddin Haqqani took himself off to the Gulf and he hung out there for a few months, tried to gather support, I think, for a coup that didn't come his way. He was advised to be patient. He is the supreme leader in waiting as the caliph. And I think that he's now spending more time in his patch on the Pakistan border in the provinces there. I think also he's very close to ISKP and to the TTP. And there was, I was told recently, an effort to, and as we know, Haqqani has also put himself forward as a mediator between the TTP and the Pakistani side, which is kind of like the fox guarding the hen house, if you like. I think that there was some sort of an effort recently to move TTP personnel away from the border to at least give the Pakistani side some semblance of an impression that they were trying to bring them under control. But local people in places where they tried to resettle them wouldn't have it because they saw themselves then becoming potential targets for Pakistani airstrikes. I think that the Kandahar-Kabul differences remain to an extent, but have moved himself out of the firing range. Haibatullah is in the ascendancy, who is very much Mullah Yaqoob, the son of Mullah Omar, very much in the Kabul camp, is also proving useful because it was him who went to Moscow and signed the defence arrangements there. So another long-winded, all over the place answer by way of saying, I think Kandahar has got it nailed down for the time being, and that's not just politically, it's economically as well.
Thank you, Lynne. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much. And yeah, good luck to you with your work.
Oh, it's so nice to talk to you. And I would like to be on the asking side next time because I'm sure you've got a lot to say that I could learn from as well. So maybe we can make that arrangement.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.